The moment I saw my daughter's car pull away from the park bench where she'd left me, something inside me knew she wasn't coming back. My arthritic fingers clutched the thin plastic bag of medications she'd handed me moments before. "I'll be right back, Dad. Just wait here for 15 minutes while I run a quick errand." The sky above was steel grey, promising rain, and the wind cut through my worn jacket like paper. At 72, with pneumonia barely behind me, I felt a chill that went deeper than the weather. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. My name is Paul White. For 40 years, I worked as an electrician on public works projects across the county. Every day, I'd wake before dawn, pack my lunch in the same metal box, and drive to whichever site needed me that day. My hands grew calloused and my back eventually curved, but I never complained, not once, because everything I did, every extra shift I took, every dollar I saved was for one person, my daughter Stephanie. Her mother died when Stephanie was only 4. Cancer, quick and merciless. I remember standing at the funeral, holding this tiny hand in mine, promising myself that I would give her everything her mother would have wanted for her. And I did. Private school tuition that cost more than my monthly mortgage. Health insurance plans that covered everything from braces to that appendix surgery when she was 14. Summer language programs in Europe when she was 16. A full college education at one of those fancy business schools where they teach you how to make money from money. I lived in the same small house for 30 years, slept on the same mattress until the springs left marks on my back, wore the same winter coat until the elbows were patched twice over. But Stephanie never went without, never had to worry about money or opportunity or security. That was my gift to her, my purpose. "Dad, please don't embarrass me," she'd say whenever I visited her at college. My work boots and faded jeans stood out among the polished loafers and designer clothes of her friends' parents. I learned to stay quiet at those parent weekends, to nod and smile when the conversation turned to stock portfolios or vacation homes. I didn't mind. Her success was my success. After graduation, Stephanie met Donald Garcia at a networking event. He worked for an investment firm, all slick suits and perfect hair. The first time she brought him home, his eyes swept over my modest living room with barely disguised contempt. "Your father's place is quaint," he told her, loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen where I was preparing the best meal I could afford. Steak I'd splurged on, potatoes I'd grown in my small garden. "We won't be here long," Stephanie had replied, as if my home was a temporary inconvenience. They married 6 months later. I paid for what I could of the wedding, though Donald's parents covered most of it. I sat at the family table, of course, but felt like a stranger as conversation flowed around me, talk of properties and investments and connections I didn't have. "Your dad is quite traditional, isn't he?" I overheard Donald's mother say to Stephanie at the reception. "He did his best," Stephanie replied, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But that generation just doesn't understand how the world works now. That generation." As if my decades of sacrifice could be dismissed as outdated thinking. When they decided to buy their first home, a place 3 times the size of my own, Stephanie called me. Not to visit, not to catch up, but with that tone I'd come to recognize. "Dad, we found the perfect starter home, but we're a little short on the down payment. Just temporarily, of course. Donald's bonus is coming in 3 months. I withdrew $30,000 from my retirement fund, paid the penalty, handed over the check without conditions. "Thanks, Dad," she said, barely looking up from her phone. "We'll pay you back as soon as Donald's bonus comes through." The bonus came and went. The repayment never materialized. When their son, my grandson Michael, was born, I spent another $5,000 furnishing the nursery. Crib, changing table, rocking chair, monitor system, the best of everything. "Dad, this is nice," Stephanie said, running her finger along the crib rail. "But we were really hoping for the Bellini model. This one is a bit basic, like me, like the life I'd lived to give her everything." The pneumonia hit me hard last winter. At my age, what should have been a 2-week recovery stretched into months. I started forgetting small things, where I put my keys, whether I'd taken my morning pills. Nothing serious, just the normal fog of aging and illness. But Stephanie saw an opportunity. "Dad, Donald and I have been talking," she said during one of her increasingly rare visits. She sat primly on the edge of my sofa, as if afraid to settle in. "There's this really nice assisted living facility near us. Private rooms, activities, medical staff on call." "I'm not going to any facility," I said immediately. "This is my home. I'll die in this house, not surrounded by strangers." She exchanged a look with Donald that made my stomach tighten. "It's not safe for you to live alone anymore," Donald said in that smooth, patronizing tone he used when talking about anything related to me. "You're becoming forgetful. What if you leave the stove on? What if you fall?" "I've lived alone for 30 years, I replied. "I'm not confused, just tired. The pneumonia took a lot out of me." Stephanie sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. "Dad, we're just trying to do what's best for you. What's best for me." A phrase I'd used countless times when she was growing up, when making decisions about her future. Now it was being turned against me. They left that day without resolution, but I could feel something had shifted. The conversations became more frequent, more pressured. Donald started sending me brochures for various communities. Stephanie began showing up unannounced to check on me, her eyes scanning my home for any sign of decline she could use as evidence. Then came that Saturday in early March. Stephanie arrived alone, unusually cheerful. "Dad, let's go for a drive. The weather's getting nicer and you've been cooped up all winter. We can go to Riverside Park, watch the ducks for a while." Something in her voice should have warned me, a brightness that didn't match her eyes, but I was so grateful for the invitation, for any gesture that felt like the daughter I remembered, that I agreed immediately. "Bring a jacket," she said, "and your medications, just in case we're out longer than expected." The park was nearly empty when we arrived. A few joggers braved the cold, their breath forming clouds in the crisp air. Stephanie led me to a bench overlooking the river, helped me settle. "I need to run a quick errand," she said, handing me a plastic grocery bag containing my pill bottles. 15 minutes, tops. Just enjoy the fresh air." I watched her walk away, her designer boots clicking on the pavement. Her car, a luxury SUV I could never have afforded, pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared around the corner. 1 hour passed, then 2. The temperature dropped as clouds gathered overhead. My phone had only 10% battery left, and my calls to Stephanie went straight to voicemail. My chest tightened, the lingering pneumonia making each breath a struggle in the cold air. A few people walked by, casting curious glances at the elderly man shivering alone on a bench. "Are you all right, sir?" A young man in a park maintenance uniform finally approached. "You've been sitting here for hours." "My daughter," I managed between chattering teeth. "She's coming back for me." But even as I said it, I knew the truth. She wasn't coming back, not in 15 minutes, not ever. The park worker, James, according to his name tag, called an ambulance when he realized I was running a fever. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was the wail of sirens, and the thought that in 40 years of fatherhood, I'd never imagined an ending like this. I woke up in a hospital bed, an IV in my arm, and monitors beeping steadily beside me. A nurse with kind eyes adjusted something on my chart. "Mr. White, you're at St. Vincent's Hospital. You were brought in with severe hypothermia and a respiratory infection. Do you remember what happened?" The memories flooded back, the park bench, the cold, Stephanie driving away. I nodded slowly. "Is there someone we can call for you? Family?" "No," I whispered. "There's no one." But I was wrong. The hospital had already found Stephanie's contact information in my wallet. They'd called her that morning. "Your daughter sounded surprised to hear from us," the social worker told me later that day. Her name was Mariana, and she had the careful, measured tone of someone who had seen too many cases like mine. She claimed she'd only left you for a few minutes to run an errand. I said nothing. What was there to say? That my only child had abandoned me in a park? That the daughter I'd sacrificed everything for had decided I was too much trouble to keep around? Mr. White, Mariana continued gently, leaving an elderly person with health issues alone in a public place for hours is considered elder abandonment. It's a form of abuse. The hospital has filed a report with Adult Protective Services, and the police have been notified. Abuse. The word hung in the air between us. In all my years of raising Stephanie alone, through tantrums and teenage rebellion and college tuition bills that kept me awake at night, I had never once raised a hand to her, had never even raised my voice, and now I was the victim of abuse. There were security cameras in the parking lot, Mariana added. They captured your daughter leaving you and driving away. It's pretty clear evidence. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted beyond words. I don't want to press charges, I said finally. She's still my daughter. Mariana's expression softened. That's your choice, Mr. White. But the state may still pursue the case, especially given the severity of your condition when you were brought in. That night, alone in my hospital room, I reached under my pillow and pulled out the small voice recorder I'd started carrying weeks ago. Something in Stephanie and Donald's increasing visits and pressured conversations had triggered an old electrician's instinct for self-protection. I'd recorded their last few visits, their discussions about facilities, their thinly veiled suggestions that my home would sell for a good price in the current market. The next morning, I asked to use the hospital phone, not to call Stephanie, but to call Frank Rivers, a retired attorney I'd done electrical work for years ago. We'd stayed in touch, meeting occasionally for coffee or chess in the park, the same park where my daughter had left me to freeze. Paul, Frank's voice was warm with concern. The hospital called me as your emergency contact. What the hell happened? I told him everything. About the years of financial support, about Donald's influence, about the recordings, about the park bench. I need your help, I said finally, not to punish Stephanie, but to protect myself. Frank arrived an hour later, legal pad in hand, face grim with determination. What you're describing is elder abuse, plain and simple, he said, after listening to the recordings. And you were smart to document it. What do you want to do? I thought about that question for a long time. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? My daughter back? The real Stephanie, not this cold stranger who could leave her father on a park bench. I want to be safe, I said finally, and I want her to understand what she's done. The next day, Stephanie finally appeared at the hospital. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her designer clothes slightly rumpled, the first time I'd ever seen her less than perfectly put together. "Dad," she whispered from the doorway. "I'm so sorry. There was an emergency with Michael's school, and then my phone died. And by the time I got back to the park, you were gone. I've been frantic." The lie fell between us like a stone. We both knew the security cameras told a different story. We both knew her phone hadn't died. The hospital had reached her on the first try. "Stephanie," I said quietly, "please, don't." "Don't what?" Her voice rose defensively. "Don't lie to me. Not anymore." She sank into the visitor's chair, her face crumpling. "I didn't mean for you to get sick. We just thought if you experienced how difficult it was to be on your own, you might see that the facility is the best option. You left me in a park in March with a respiratory infection," I said, my voice steady, despite the pain in my chest that had nothing to do with pneumonia. "You didn't answer my calls. You drove away. It wasn't supposed to be that long." Her voice took on the whining quality I remembered from her teenage years. "Donald said an hour, tops, just enough to scare you a little." "Donald, of course. Where is he now?" I asked. "He thought it would be better if I came alone." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Dad, please, we can work this out. We're family." Family. The word that had defined my entire adult life. The reason for every sacrifice, every extra shift, every denied pleasure. "Yes," I said slowly, "we are family, which is why what you did hurts so much more." The door opened, and Frank stepped in, followed by a police officer and a woman I didn't recognize. "Mr. White," the officer said, "I'm Detective Martinez. We need to ask you and your daughter some questions about what happened Saturday." Stephanie's face drained of color as she realized what was happening. "Dad, what is this?" "This is the consequence of your actions," Frank said, his lawyer voice in full effect. "Mr. White has evidence of ongoing elder abuse, culminating in abandonment that resulted in hospitalization." "Evidence?" Stephanie looked between us, confusion giving way to understanding. "You were recording us, your own family?" "I recorded people who were trying to manipulate me out of my home," I corrected gently. "People who left me in a park to freeze." What followed was the hardest 2 hours of my life. Stephanie crying, then angry, then pleading, as she realized the seriousness of what she'd done. The detective taking notes, her face professionally neutral, but her eyes occasionally meeting mine with unmistakable sympathy. Frank handling the legal aspects, laying out options ranging from restraining orders to criminal charges. In the end, I couldn't bring myself to see my daughter arrested. Despite everything, she was still the little girl I'd raised alone, still the center of my world for so many years. But I wouldn't be returning to my home either, not with Stephanie having a key, not with Donald's influence still strong. The story broke in the local news the following week. Daughter abandons elderly father after years of financial support. The security camera footage played on the evening news. Stephanie helping me to the bench, handing me the bag of medications, walking away without looking back. The hospital photos of my condition upon arrival, the recordings of their conversations about convincing me to move to a facility. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Stephanie's real estate business collapsed overnight as clients cancelled listings. Donald's investment firm placed him on leave, pending an ethics investigation. Their neighbors, once friendly, crossed the street to avoid them. Meanwhile, I became something of a local celebrity. The abandoned electrician, they called me. Letters poured in from other elderly parents who had experienced similar treatment from their children. Donations appeared, which I redirected to elder abuse prevention programs. And most surprisingly, an offer from Gregory Martinez, the owner of a local senior housing complex. "Mr. White," he said during his visit to my hospital room, "I was moved by your story. Not just the abandonment, but your decades of sacrifice for your daughter. I'd like to offer you a home in our community, not a facility, but an actual cottage on our grounds, no strings attached." "Why would you do that?" I asked, suspicious after all that had happened. "Because 20 years ago, my father worked alongside you on the Memorial Bridge project. You helped him with extra shifts when my mother was sick. He never forgot your kindness." The world, it seemed, was smaller and more connected than I'd realized. 3 weeks after being abandoned on that park bench, I moved into a small but comfortable cottage in the Riverside senior community. My neighbors were other retirees, former teachers, nurses, one fellow electrician who recognized me from a project in the 90s. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The legal proceedings continued. Though I didn't press criminal charges, the district attorney moved forward with a case for elder abuse. Stephanie and Donald were ordered to pay restitution, covering my medical bills and providing a monthly stipend. They were also required to complete community service at assisted living facilities, caring for the very elderly people they had once seen as disposable. 6 months passed before Stephanie called me again. By then, I had settled into my new life. I volunteered at the community workshop, helping other residents with small repairs. I played chess twice a week with a retired professor. I even started dating again, a widow named Eleanor who taught watercolor classes and laughed at my terrible electrician jokes. "Dad?" Stephanie's voice was small on the phone. "Can we talk?" We met at a coffee shop midway between our homes. She looked different. The designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, the perfect manicure gone, dark circles under her eyes. "Donald left," she said without preamble. after the firm let him go. Said he couldn't handle the social stigma of what happened, took most of our savings with him. I said nothing, waiting. I lost the house, she continued. I'm renting an apartment now, just me and Michael. Still, I waited. Dad? She finally looked up, tears in her eyes. I don't know how to apologize for what I did. It was unforgivable. I let Donald convince me that you were a burden, that your house and savings were our inheritance being wasted. I became someone I don't recognize. Oh, I thought of all the nights I'd worked overtime to pay for her dance lessons, all the school lunches I'd packed while eating simple sandwiches myself, all the proud parent moments at graduations and award ceremonies. When I left you on that bench, she continued, I told myself it was for your own good, that you'd realize you needed help. But that was a lie I told myself to avoid facing what I'd become. I abandoned my father, the man who never abandoned me, not once in my entire life. The coffee between us grew cold, as silence stretched between two people who shared blood but had become strangers. When you were born, I said finally, the nurse placed you in my arms, and you couldn't even hold your head up yet. You were completely helpless. I promised you then that I would always take care of you, always protect you. Stephanie wiped tears from her face. When you left me on that bench, I continued, I couldn't even stand up by myself. I was as helpless as you had been as a baby. The difference is I kept my promise to you for your entire life. You broke yours to me in an afternoon. She flinched as if I'd struck her. Dad, please, tell me how to make this right. Tell me what I can do. I looked at my daughter, truly looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Humility. The entitled woman who had driven away from that park bench was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the weight of her actions. When I was teaching you to walk, I said slowly, you fell down hundreds of times. Each time I helped you back up. I didn't expect you to run immediately. I was patient. I celebrated each small step forward. Understanding dawned in her eyes. This is like that, I continued. You've fallen far from the person I raised you to be. I can't pick you up this time. You have to stand on your own. But I can be patient. I can watch for those small steps forward. Will you ever forgive me? She whispered. I thought about Eleanor waiting for me back at Riverside, about my new friends, about the peace I'd found away from the manipulation and pressure. Forgiveness isn't a moment, Stephanie. It's a process. It starts with honesty, continues with changed behavior, and grows with time. We're at the beginning of that process, not the end. She nodded slowly. Michael asks about you, she said after a moment. He misses his grandpa. For the first time since entering the coffee shop, I felt something soften within me. My grandson, innocent in all this, shouldn't lose his relationship with me because of his parents' actions. Bring him to the community center next Saturday, I said. They have a kite-flying event on the main lawn. I'll be there. As we parted ways outside the coffee shop, Stephanie hesitated, then spoke without looking at me. When you left me at the hospital when I was little, for my tonsil surgery, I was so scared. Do you remember what you told me? I remembered. I said that being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what's right, even when you're terrified. I'm trying to be brave now, Dad, she said quietly. I'm terrified you'll never trust me again, but I'm still here, trying to do what's right. I watched her walk to her car, not the luxury SUV anymore, but a modest sedan. Before she drove away, I called out to her, Stephanie. She turned, hope flashing across her face. When you were learning to walk, there was something else I did besides help you up when you fell. What? She asked. I celebrated every step forward, no matter how small. Her smile, tentative but real, was the first genuine expression I'd seen from her in years. Back at Riverside, Eleanor was waiting for me on my small porch, a book open on her lap. How did it go? She asked, taking my hand as I sat beside her. Like most important things in life, I replied. Painful, necessary, and unfinished. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Will you see her again? Yes, I said, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of forgiveness, but on my terms this time, with clear boundaries and eyes wide open. That night, as Eleanor and I walked to the community dining hall for dinner, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends, I realized something profound. The abandonment that had nearly killed me had ultimately saved me, freed me from manipulation, opened doors to new relationships, and taught me that at 72, it wasn't too late to start again. The next morning, I received a text message from Stephanie, a photo of Michael holding a homemade card. "I miss you, Grandpa," written in crayon across the top. "Small steps forward. That's how healing begins." If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, just click on the box on the screen. Thank you so much for listening.